Okay, I'm 10 minutes late because I let I don't know if anybody's here, but I'm 10 minutes late. I let Father Joseph finish his show for anybody watching this now, and now I'm starting. So here we go. We're gonna do high treason tonight, and I'm gonna go through a couple documents that I think are kind of important. To try to break down what I'm getting at. And I will continue my series on the new martyrs afterwards. But so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to explain where ROCOR's at today. ROCOR MP. And if you don't know where ROCOR MP is, there's guys like DPH and, you know, uh, you know, Dyer and all those guys. I'm just going to say their names, whatever. They're in the ROCOR Moscow Patriarchate. And I'm going to be talking about what actually happened, because a lot of people don't understand the difference. Because Father Seraphim Rose, they know about Father Seraphim Rose maybe, and they think, well, he was in ROCOR, or St. John Maximovich was in ROCOR, Archbishop Verky and all these other people, Bishop Nectari, those type of people. And they'll say, well, that's ROCOR. And they'll go to ROCOR MP and think it's the same thing. Well, it's not. So we're going to find out what happened and why it's not the same ROCOR. Um, so I'm going to start off. I'm not starting with high treason, but I was just going to give some context, and I hope everybody's all right tonight. How you guys doing? What's up, Machine? What's up, Isaac? Hello, Father Antonios. Your blessings, please. Thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a document called The Demise of ROCOR, the Synod of Metropolitan Agafongal, and the Ecclesiology of Cyprianite Synod and Resistance by Father Stephen Allen. Now the paper's a little dated. Um, it's a couple years old at this point, but I think that it does go over, for the most part, what went down in 2007. So thank you, Father. Yeah. So it explains what kind of went down. So here we go. We're at the introduction. It says the synod, commonly styled as ROCOR A, that is the hierarchy of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, under the presidency of Metropolitan Agafongal of Odessa, claims that its hierarchy is the only canonical successor to the hierarchy of ROCOR, as it existed prior to the submission of all the ROCOR bishops, accepting the then Bishop Agafongal to the Moscow Patriarchate in 2007. This claim rests on three assertions. Now, it is dated, and they have at this point gone into communion with the GOCK. Maybe we can go over that too. Maybe I probably have to find like a union agreement. Maybe, I don't know, something like that. But mainly there's a certain page on here that I really want to get to because I think it explains it well of what happened. So assertion one is Agafongo of Odessa was the only anti-MP bishop who remained a loyal and obedient member of the Lower Synod until the bitter end of ROCOR as we knew it. He broke with them at the last minute because being absorbed into the Moscow Patriarchate was simply too much to swallow. Unlike the several of the ROCOR's prior anti-orthodox and uncanonical acts, which, though distasteful, or perhaps not, were still within the realm of palatability for Bishop Agafongal. On the basis of this distinction, he claims the mantle of succession. He was the only man left standing after the fight, so to speak, since the bishops of ROCOR, who had providentially escaped the control of the fatally infiltrated New York Synod before 2007, such as Valentin of Suzdal and Metropolitan Vitaly, Lazarus Zarbinko et al., and were subsequently declared schismatic, defrocked, etc., by the same New York Synod, already controlled by the pro-Soviet party, truly were, according to the obedient Bishop Agafongal, schismatic and defrocked. I think that's an interesting point to make, and I don't know what someone from their side would say to that. I mean, it's how they would react to this particular paper. So here we go. It says, thus we have, according to the Ongophongalite, that's a weird, I don't know, position, 3 sets of ROCOR bishops or former bishops as of May 2007. A false bishops who perform invalid mysteries within the false churches of ROAC, RTOC, and ROCI, etc. So this is the position of the Ongophongalites. Say that 10 times. So it says B, true bishops who performed valid mysteries within the true church of the MP, Archbishop Mark and Archbishop Alaris and company. And C, one true bishop who did not elect to join his beloved brother true bishops in their tragically imprudent submission to the true and grace-bearing church of the MP, Bishop Agafongo. I will say this, is that Father Stephen Allen, if you've listened to any of these talks, he's a really funny guy. Great. I like to listen to him. His little podcast stuff he's got going on. I highly recommend it. But I don't know if he's changed his position on this stuff or not since they went into communion. So it goes on. It says, assertion 2. Unlike their rivals, Metropolitan Ongofongo and the Synod loyally and obediently accept all the decisions and acts of the ROCOR Synod prior to their unfortunate decision to be swallowed by the Moscow Patriarchate. This includes the 1994 decision to proclaim the theory of Metropolitan Cyprianophili regarding the status of, quote, uncondemned heretics. Yeah, this is interesting. So, as the anciently accepted teaching of the Orthodox Church and enter into communion with the, quote, Synod and the resistance under Metropolitan Cyprian and thereby definitively destroy the possibility of communion with the Synod of the genuine Orthodox Christians. Okay, well, I got a phone call in the middle of that. I don't know if anybody heard that, but whatever. Okay, so let's get back to this. Where was I? Okay, I'm sorry. So it says assertion 2. Wait. One true bishop who did not acknowledge. Where are we at? Oh, yeah. It says this, including the 1994 decision to proclaim the theory of Metropolitan Cyprianophili regarding the status of uncondemned heretics as the anciently accepted teaching of the Orthodox Church and enter into communion with the Synod and resistance under Metropolitan Cyprian, and thereby definitively destroy the possibility of communion with the Synod of the genuine Orthodox Christians, precisely on the basis of embracing this theory. So I would imagine that was under Archbishop Exentios, maybe at that time. So, assertion 3. Metropolitan Ongofongo logically then sought out his brother moderate bishops of the Synod in resistance to consecrate other bishops for the ROCOR. This act finally and ontologically anointed his. That can't be right. It had to be somebody else. That was at the head of the GOC. Anyways, so it says this act finally and ontologically anointed his group status as the, quote, real ROCOR, since as well known, the, quote, real ROCOR was Cyprianite in its ecclesiology and ecclesiastical alliances. How should we in the Church of the genuine Orthodox Christians regard the claims of the Agathangelites? Let us begin by examining the ecclesiastical position of the ROCOR prior to 1994, and then from 1994 to 1997. I'm pretty sure that the Synod in Resistance and, ROCOR A kind of renounced that ecclesiology when they went into communion. Don't quote me on that, but maybe someone else can confirm it, and I don't know. I think that's the case. So it says, the ROCOR's ecclesiological position vis-a-vis world orthodoxy prior to 1994. From the start, one needs to recognize that ROCOR never formally broke communion with any jurisdiction of world orthodoxy except the Moscow Patriarchate, the Volgian Parisian Schism, and the North American Metropolitan OCA Schism, i.e., the other Russian groups. Many in the genuine Orthodox Church of Greece used to decades of detailed, agonizing, carefully articulations and impassioned arguments about ecclesiology find it hard to realize that for the most of its history, most of ROCOR's bishops and clergy did not think carefully about such questions, except perhaps in regarding in the Moscow Patriarchate and other Russian groups. There were outstanding individuals in ROCOR, such as the Holy Confessor Metropolitan Vitaly, who saw clearly how the ROCOR should deal with the apostasy of global world orthodoxy. Excuse me. So it says, but most of the ROCOR bishops and clergy simply had an instinctive, albeit healthy, distaste for modernism and ecumenism that never led them further to undertake the process of rational discussions necessary to make clear decisions about these problems. The ROCOR's official policies regarding concelebration with jurisdictions other than those mentioned above were never consistent, and the policy as it developed in the 1960s and onward, and of most not concelebrating, was unwritten and de facto, not de jure. The ROCOR Synod allowed the diocesan bishops almost completely discretion in this matter, and therefore the practice varied from one diocese to another. The most obvious contrast was between the North American dioceses, which were generally strict, and the European dioceses, most of whose clergy, following the lead of their Abba, Archbishop Anthony of Geneva, always saw themselves as part of, quote, world orthodoxy, and were willing to concelebrate with anyone other than the Soviets and the Volgians, including the ecumenical patriarchate. That's pretty interesting. So I haven't read this in a while, so it's kind of telling, like, you get these kind of black and white images of how old ROCOR was, and here we have Father Stephen Allen sort of, refuting the whole thing and saying everybody was a mess, really. Like, no one had a straight ecclesiology. Like, depending on where you were, you might find a bishop that was totally world orthodox, and then you have someone like Saint Philaret who was basically fully true orthodox, like the same positions we hold today. So thus ROCOR had completely pro-world orthodox bishops and clergy who denied that the ecumenism of world orthodoxy was an impediment to concelebration, and naturally objected loudly to anathematizing the ecumenists. But ROCOR as a body never stated this group's position as being the position of ROCOR. They acted as individuals, or at most as individual dioceses, until 2007, when their position became the official ROCOR MP line. So it's about to get interesting. So as if ROCOR had a large, quote, mainstream of bishops and clergy who did not want to pray with the ecumenists, but recoiled sentimentally from saying that they were really outside the church until 1994. However, the ROCOR never explicitly subscribed to the full-blown catastrophic Cyprianite position that it is fide, I don't know how to say this stuff. The uncondemned heretics are fide. I think that's how you say it. Uncondemned heretics are guaranteed to remain in the church, and that to believe otherwise is unorthodox. So that's kind of like with Cyprian's position, that you could be a heretic until you were condemned by council or something. I think that was his kind of like ecclesiological stance or something. But I've heard people say, well, that was just his personal opinion, and that wasn't, the synods as a whole. And maybe that's true. Maybe it was sort of like how ROCOR is, that depending on the bishop, you might hear something else. So it goes on. ROCOR also had a large, uncondemned heretics that are guaranteed to remain in the church, and that to believe otherwise is unorthodox. There was also, in the midst of all this confusion, a small but distinguished group of ROCOR bishops and clergy who held and clearly articulated the Orthodox position that notorious unrepentant heretic bishops are to be regarded as pseudo bishops, even prior to a conciliar judgment. But they taught this only as individuals, or at most on the diocesan level. During the long reign of Metropolitan Vitaly, this, quote, strict party gained the upper hand in forming the mindset and projecting the public image of the ROCOR. So under St. Philaret, he was the one who was pushing the true Orthodox stance. And it was due to their influence that the de facto policy of non-concelebration spread organically through most of the ROCOR's diocese. Their position, however, that the ecumenists were simply obviously heretics and outside the church, was never formally adopted by the ROCOR Synod. During the sad twilight reign of Metropolitan Vitaly, who never seemed to be able to make up his mind whose side he was on, this party completely lost their grip on the direction of their church. The one synodal act of ROCOR, which came to close to stating a clear position, was the anathema of 1983. From earlier episodes, we've been through the anathema 1983, so we should, for those that have stuck with me, you know a little bit about it. So check back in Dogma Free. What's up, man? And we're going to continue on. So I'm trying to get through this paper pretty quick so I can get to high treason. So we're going to go on here. It says Metropolitan Vitaly, this strict party gained the upper hand in forming the mindset and projecting the public image of the ROCOR, and it was due to their influence that the de facto policy of non-concelebration spread organically through most of the ROCOR diocese. So this is what, important point to make is that St. Philaret was pushing non-concelebration with world orthodoxy. He was a leader in releasing the anathema against ecumenism. He did not want to be involved with heretics. Their position, however, that the ecumenists were simply obviously heretics and out of the sight of the church, was never formally adopted by the ROCOR Synod. During the sad twilight reign of Metropolitan Vitaly, who never seemed to be able to make up his mind whose side he was on, this party completely lost their grip on the direction of the church. Okay, so I read that twice, but I think it was needed to be confirmed. The one synodal act of ROCOR, which came to close to stating a clear position, was the anathema of 1983, but its use as a canonical basis for formally breaking communion with World Orthodox hierarchs was publicly rejected by the 1986 Nativity encyclical by Metropolitan Vitaly, which clearly states that the anathema applies to no one, a position which the other members of the synod did not dispute. From that point on, the anathema was a dead letter. There were cathedrals where the ruling bishops disdained even to proclaim it pro forma on the Sunday of Orthodoxy. Okay, whether they wanted to proclaim it or not, the reality is that, they released the anathema against ecumenism. They obviously felt that it needed to be released. It doesn't really matter that Metropolitan Vitaly kind of went back on it and was like, it applies to no one. It's because first of all, the anathema is not only bound on earth, it's loosed in heaven or something like that. Maybe I'm saying that wrong, but yeah, like heretics are anathematized by the Lord, are our Lord Jesus Christ first and foremost, and then the church follows suit, on earth, the church on earth, with the church in heaven. So in 1994, the decision regarding the Cyprianism finally destroyed any remaining possibility that the ROCOR would formally assert that a local church could anathematize heretics, much less that a heretic is outside the church even prior to a consecular judgment. The quote mainstream of old ROCOR attitude to examining the canonical tradition and employing its criteria for breaking communion with heretics was encapsulated perfectly by a brief reply I elucidated from the Bishop Cyril of Seattle. The present ROCOR MP, Archbishop of San Francisco, while speaking with him in the quarters above the church of the Resurrection on the 6th Avenue in San Francisco in December of 1999. This is Father Stephen Allen. He says, quote, Vladika, our bishop simply must ascertain the canonical criteria for remaining in communion or breaking communion with other hierarchies, and then formally act on them regarding world orthodoxy. This is a matter of our spiritual survival. This Bishop Kirill replying, Father Stephen, I do not want to know about such things, and I don't. He said, I don't know about such things, and I don't want to know about such things. That's all. That's about all. That about says it all. Okay, so that was the attitude. We don't want to know. We don't care. So who cares about our spiritual survival? Whatever. So we go on. So what held ROCOR together? Humanly speaking, then was not a clearly articulated ecclesiology, but rather Russian patriotism. The anti-communism of the Cold War era and instinctively conservative piety. Its bishops were responsible for governing a large worldwide diaspora whose churchmen fell everywhere on the spectrum of opinion regarding most of church matters. And the Council of Bishops always preferred compromise or avoidance to clarity with its concordance confrontation. As a body, despite its noble history and outstanding examples of piety and pastoral love of many pious bishops and clergy, the ROCOR never dealt realistically or effectively with the growing apostasy of ecumenism. In the end, its lack of a clear and defensible position left it in an unguarded city open to its enemies, and it was destroyed. When Metropolitan Agafongo and his spokesman then claimed to carry on the quote traditional ROCOR attitude regarding ecclesiology, this is difficult to deny or confirm, since there was no identifiable quote traditional ROCOR ecclesiology. Just a cacophony of conflicting sentiments, roughly expressed uh, by an inchoate opinions drowning out the quote still small voice of ecclesiastical truth articulated by an increasingly powerless minority. Wow. So, an artificial and alien creation. However, the Cyprianite theory was imported late in the days as a weapon with which the pro MP party planned to give a moral stroke in the long, systematic death struggle against the freedom and orthodoxy of ROCOR. It seems to me, just like from looking at it, like the paperwork or whatever, when Cyprian released something right after the anathema against ecumenism, like a response to it, like like you can't anathematize ecumenism kind of type thing. I don't remember, something like that. But he kind of like tried to undermine the anathema with his own thing. That's what I remember. But it says B, the 1994 union with the quote synod in resistance. The agents of the Russian government and the subsidiary, the Moscow Patriarchate, who are orchestrating the campaign to crush ROCOR beneath the feet of the MP, with the steadily increasing successes throughout the 1960s, or 1990s rather, knew that they could not get the ROCOR rank and file suddenly to acknowledge this atheistic created criminal organization as a real church, much less the quote mother church. Yeah. Here we go. This is the heavy hitter right here. So everyone knew that the ROCOR predated the Moscow Patriarchate in its present form. That's something they will not tell you. They will tell you that the MP's older and ROCOR was in communion with the MP and all this other stuff before. That's a lie. They never were in communion with the MP. They came out of the 1917-1918 council, all free Russian council. And the Sergianist church was controlled by the Soviets, and the Catacomb Church were the true Russian Orthodox Church. They had they were the true successors to Russian Orthodoxy prior to the Soviets taking over and Stalin setting up his puppet patriarchate. So here we go. It says obviously bogus. Uh, Okay, everyone knew that the ROCOR predated the Moscow Patriarchate in its present form, and that such an obviously bogus organization as the MP could not possibly constitute the canonical hierarchy of the actual Russian Orthodox Church. The ROCOR mainstream might not have known what they felt about anyone else, but they knew what they felt about the NP. It was not the church. Moreover, the ROCOR right wing not only felt it, they understood it, and clearly could explain it. So here we go. Is everybody doing all right? We good? All right. Yeah. So it says Archbishop Mark and Archbishop uh, Laris rather, of the hierarchical frontmen for the KGB operation to destroy ROCOR, found in the ecclesiastical theory of Metropolitan Cyprian, an ideal Trojan horse to carry the acknowledgement of the MP as the church, even to the bastion of right-wing ROCOR opinion. Over the objections of Metropolitan Vitaly and Archbishop Anthony of Los Angeles, as well as those as retired Bishop Gregory Grabe, the ROCOR Council of Bishops Sobor proclaimed in July of 1994 that the ecclesiastical teachings of Metropolitan Cyprian was precisely that also of the Russian Church Abroad, explicitly on the basis of this shared ecclesiology. The ROCOR and the quote Synod and Resistance established canonical communion. The pro-MP forces lost no time in fanning the miasma of the quote moderate ecclesiology through the ranks of the ROCOR right wing to fuddle their minds and weaken their moral will to fight back. Suddenly, one was hearing at all times from all quarters that the MP was the mother church, and it undoubtedly had grace. That to deny the grace of the holy, quote, mother church was blasphemous, and so forth. Many of those who became closest personally to the Cyprianites from among the conservatives in ROCOR, because historically it was the conservatives who had always been sympathetic to the Greek Old Calendarists by temperament and outlook. They were in communion, by the way. So this was perhaps one of the developments which the agent architects of the 1994 Union had foreseen. Now everywhere, right-wingers were heard to be saying that the MP was a church and its mysteries were therefore, quote, grace-filled. The next step was to go from, quote, they have grace and they are a church to, quote, therefore we must not remain separate from them. The intellectual acrobatics of the libertine Cyprianite dialectic lie a bit outside the ordinary person's capacity to subtlety, a fact that, far from denying, the servants of Cyprianism frequently point out to us. Their inferiors, a trained, fully initiated resistor, normally equipped with a PhD, understands why he steadfastly refuses to receive what he steadfastly believes to be genuine holy mysteries from men he steadfastly regards as real bishops and priests. But such a particular gnosis is rather. He's saying, like, these guys will tell you, like, yeah, they're real bishops and they have grace-filled mysteries, but why don't you guys go and get them from them then? Why don't you go get them from them? You know, but they have some dialectic to explain why. So, from men he steadfastly regards as real bishops and priests, but such a peculiar gnosis is rather difficult to maintain for the ordinary sort of mind. In the 1990s, the erudite mystagogues of this rarefied understanding were too few to initiate fully the rank and file of the ROCOR, and therefore many of the latter, being but more mere mortals, the sarcasm is wild, and having accepted the MP as our church, as our mother church, rather easily took the next mental step. Quote, it is inevitable that we must join them. At this point, Troy was burning with critical mass, and the former right wing of ROCOR captivated by this thought, frogs hypnotized by the snake. The task of Moscow's loyal servants in the ROCOR hierarchy became quite easy. The quote, union with the Bolshevik Church had quietly become a foregone conclusion. When Metropolitan Agafangel and his followers therefore point to their acceptance of the Cyprianite ecclesiology as one of their bona fides, one cannot help but be struck with sadness. A dagger plunged into the heart of their beloved church still appears to them rather as a standard of the faith. Wow. So he's saying this ecclesiology that they think, well, at least they thought, to be a good thing or something that they hold dear is really a dagger to true Orthodox belief. So he goes, part two here. When Metropolitan Agafangel rather, and his followers were casting doubt for a solution to their problem of having only one bishop, they did not immediately decide on the synod and resistance. A committee of Agafangelites clergy heard of a delegation from the GOC Kiosis Synod at a meeting in Astoria, New York, regarding the history and ideology of the resistors. As one of the GOC delegates later informed me, however, they did not seem terribly interested, but rather spent most of the session passing a flask of spirits among themselves and making funny remarks. This is entirely in the character with the quote traditional mainstream of old ROCOR, where it was de rigueur to poo-poo scroluptuosity over canonical and dogmatic matters as bringing an unspiritual, even Roman Catholic mindset, and where a rather charming foolishness for Christ's sake often flowed from the vodka bottle. Hearing the story made me smile fondly, recalling happy days of yore and childlike companions I knew and loved. It also conveyed to me that, as usual, the quote mainstream of ROCOR did not know about such things and did not want to know about such things. So, as we all know by now, the ROCOR ended up going to the resistors for their episcopal consecrations. This is their third assertion, and as it were, resounding code in the argument that they are the continuation of ROCOR. Their apostolic succession now depends completely upon the legitimacy of a synod recognized chiefly through the good offices of a friend, Archbishop Mark, as the ROCOR sister church in 1994. This is a heavy paper, man. I kind of feel bad about reading it as I'm reading it. I'm not even going to lie to you. But whatever, the truth. I believe it's true what he's saying here. I don't know his position now. But when defending their choice of ecclesiastical allies, sometimes Agafangelites who have the sense to be a little nervous about the Cyprianite teaching pass it off as a, quote, private opinion of metropolitan situation which has no normative status. This, however, is not true. The ecclesiology of the Cyprianites is not simply a private opinion of the elder metropolitan Cyprian, it is a formal and oft promulgated position of their synod. I've seen the paperwork, that's true. And it is their formal and only justification for being separate from the legitimate authority of the genuine Greek Church. That is, the synod under Archbishop Chrysostomos. That makes sense now. So the GOC was under Archbishop Chrysostomos. I should have known that. But they would eventually have a union there. So they do not deny this. The entire legitimacy of the existence of the Cyprionite group is based on the ecclesiology, except being not only a permissible theologomenon. That's a crazy word I had to learn. But actually, an article of faith so anciently accepted, so universally accepted, and acknowledged, so clear that it justified the elder Cyprian's refusal on the basis of Apostolic Canon 34 and the 15th canon of the First and Second Council to reunite with the other Florinite bishops in the early 1980s. The contrary, however, is painfully obvious. The Cyprianite position that notorious heretics are guaranteed to remain within the church until being expelled by an ecumenical council is such a strict and peculiar construction that is rather difficult to demonstrate that any such council has ever taken place in the history of the church. Far from being the teaching of the church, is an idiosyncratic and tortuous, albeit clever, argument crafted after the fact in order to justify a schism. It learned defenders assiduously employ the most erudite and courtly language, ingeniously invoke various fathers, astound their inoculators by flights of dialectical genius, and invariably print in their opinions on the very stationary, but the teaching itself remains, alas, untrue. These are not matters of only secondary importance to the ROCOR, because the synod, whose very existence is justified solely by the claim that this theory is an accepted dogma of the Catholic Church, is precisely that the synod which has provided the canonical requirements, co-sequiturs for the ROCOR bishops. If the teachings of Metropolitan Cyprian is not really a dogma of the Church, then the Cyprianites really are schismatics. And if so, what does that mean for the apostolic succession of the Agafongal Synod? The leaders of ROCOR, when they decide to become serious about the faith instead of dreaming nostalgically about the glories of, quote, old ROCOR and the, quote, white idea, and so forth, we need to re-examine the 1994 decision, subject it to a serious and honest critique, and go where the truth leads, being the, quote, genuine errors of the old ROCOR and one's ecclesiastical understanding is actually not a good thing. The indifference of the mainstream of old ROCOR to ecclesiology enabled the KGB to destroy them. That was from priest Stephen Allen, Church of St. Spiridon, Detroit, Michigan, USA. He wrote that around 2010. But my main point was, from reading that, is the KGB took it over, right? So we're there. Okay, so I'm going to read this paper real quick. It's about 5 pages, and it's from an archive and an unpublished statement by the Australian clerics of the ROCOR dated October 11, 2006 to Archbishop Hilarion of Sydney in Australia and New Zealand. It says, Your Grace, Most Reverend Bishop, bless. We have read Your Grace's statements explaining that your absence from September Synod meeting as was due to your Grace's health condition, and that you fully agree with the Synod's decision, which approved and endorsed the act of canonical communion. All that remains is to work out the details of the ceremonial signing of the act. They're talking about the signing of the act between ROCOR and the MP, by the way. So we're about to get into that. Actually, right. Let me just step away 1 second to sort of get something water. I probably should have already done that, but. All right, I'm back. So here we go. Okay, here we go. All right. Okay. So it says, Your Grace, Most Reverend Bishop Bless, we have read Your Grace's statements explaining your absence from the September Synod meeting was due to Your Grace's health conditions that you fully agree with. The Synod's decision was approved and endorsed the canonical act of communion. Get out of here, dog. What you doing? Okay. So, canonical act of communion, with that remains, it is to work out the details of the ceremonial signing of the act. Your Grace noted in your statement that the dialogue between ROCOR and the MP, which has been going on for several years, has reached many, quote, positive agreements. Only, unfortunately, these positive agreements are not in favor of ROCOR. As the result, represents the well-known and unwavering position of the MP leadership, and at the same time, none of the essential provisions that distinguish the historical mission of ROCOR are reflected in these documents. From the discussion at the council, that's 6, all diaspora rather, it is clear that the participation of the Moscow Patriarchate in the World Council of Churches causes confusion among our clergy and laity. We will with heartfelt pain ask the hierarchy of the Russian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarch to heed the plea of our flock for the prompt removal of this temptation, says the document. What does prompt removal mean? Before or after the union with the Moscow Patriarchate? This is the question. Does the resolution state that ROCOR will not unite with the Moscow Patriarchate until the MP leaves the World Council of Churches? No, as this late stage of the negotiation process, the bishops of ROCOR will not find the courage to set conditions for His Holiness. So what does a repeat with heartfelt pain mean? Nothing. Just a request. A request that the Moscow Patriarchate can completely ignore. So I guess these were some Australian fathers or something like that, maybe some monks or something. I don't know. Let me go back to the top of the paper. It tells me. Yeah, Australian clerks of ROCOR dated October 11, 2006. The capitulation happened in 2007. So they're not feeling this at all. They're like, what are you guys doing? You're going into communion with them? They haven't, they're still a part of the World Council of Churches. What's going on? He said, they go, regarding ecumenism, how can one strictly adhere to the teaching set forth in the Creed that the Church of Christ is one and be a member of the World Council of Churches? Which churches? Is it possible to be a member of an organization and not participate in any of its prayers? The 45th canon, apostolic canon says, a bishop or presbyter or deacon who has only prayed with heretics, let him be excommunicated. But if he has allowed them to perform anything as clergy, let him be disposed. Without the MP leaving the World Council of Churches and defining and resolving the issue of Sergianism for many members, the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, who sincerely wish for rapprochement, the unification process is unacceptable and should be suspended. I wonder what they ended up doing, I wonder if they went along with it anyways. So it says 1. We members of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia have never separated and do not separate ourselves either from the Russian people or from the Russian Orthodox Church, but are in temporary self-governance based on decree number 362 of the Saint Patriarch Tikhon and his synod. We believe that the time has come for all parts of the Russian local church to come closer and return to the principles of the spirits of the All-Russian Council of 1917 and 18 through negotiations. 3. Given that many years have passed since the All-Russian Council, many problems have arisen that need to be carefully studied and returned to the canonical norms of conciliar church life. We believe that this process should take place in the spirit of truth and Christian love and mutual understanding, never separating themselves from the Russian Orthodox Church. This assertion of the ROCOR Council of Bishops on July 16th, 1927, expressed in the following words, quote, "The overseas part of the Russian Church considers itself an inseparable spiritual and united branch of the great Russian Church. It does not separate it from its mother church and does not consider itself autocephalous. It still considers its head the patriarchal local tenens Metropolitan Peter and mentions his name during services." With these words, the Council of Bishops declared that it does not support the Sergian schism created by Metropolitan Sergius. Stragoldatsky, I have trouble saying his name, but I'm sure at this point, if you've been following along with my stuff, you know who Sergius is. And if you're true Orthodox, you definitely know he is. Who ceased to commemorate his first hierarch, Metropolitan Peter, during services. At the pastoral meeting in 2003, the question was raised, is the Moscow Patriarchate our mother church? It was concluded that the MP is not our mother church. The argument was made that a mother cannot be younger than her daughter. His Grace Bishop Daniel wrote on October 20th, 2003 that the reunification with the MP in this case cannot be spoken of, as the overseas churches never belonged to the Moscow Patriarchate. Now, I guarantee you, these major guys that talk for orthodoxy all the time, that are in ROCOR MP, and you know who I'm talking about right now, they're going to tell you that the Moscow Patriarchate is their mother church. And it's not. It's not. It's a lie. They're lying. And their own bishops admitted it. This is their bishops. So, they're clergy in Australia. So it goes on. The MP is not our mother church. ROCOR has never been a part of the MP. And the church from which we never separate is not the MP, but the Russian local church of Council of 1917 and 18, whose canonical foundations of conciliar life, the resolution of the pastoral meeting of 2003, calls for a return, but only after a thorough, not secretive study of all the problems. If the MP is not the Russian local council, what is it? Proto-priest Alexander Lebedov, secretary of the ROCOR Commission for Negotiations with the MP, and proto-prester George Laren. So when we get into high treason, which I'm not going to be able to finish like high treason in one sitting, so that's going to have to be a series type thing. But I think we've gotten pretty far into this right now to sort of understand what I'm trying to get at. That this isn't right. What's going on there? And I'm not happy about it. It is what it is. They lie about it. November 14th, 1994, defined the MP as a creature of the godless communist power. In his book, The Truth About the Russian Orthodox at Home and Abroad, proto-presbyter George Grabe writes, deciding to use even religion in the favor in total war, Stalin, contrary to his previous policy, stopped the destruction of the church and proposed to Metropolitan Sergius to restore the patriarchy. It is important to note that that all this happened at the initiative of the enemies of the church. In the extremely oppressed situation in which Metropolitan Sergius Synod found itself, it could not have occurred to him that Stalin himself could receive him. Therefore, there can be no doubt that the initiative to restore the patriarchy came from Stalin himself. The urgency with which this event was carried out is emphasized by the date, on September 4th at night. There was a reception of Metropolitan Sergius, Alexis, and Nicholas by Stalin. On September 8th, the council was already convened. That's about as clear as it gets. The MP was not, like the local tenens, like Metropolitan Peter was like, okay, Sergius, like you can be the patriarch of Russia now. Like there was none of that. There was Stalin set all this up. So it goes on. What canonical status can a creature of civil authority born out of its political needs have? This is Sergianism, which the MP needs to repent of to return to the principles and spirit of the All Russian Council of 1917 and 18. Patriarch of Moscow. Yeah, so what's up, dudes? I hope they see this at some point. What's up? You like calling us schismatic? What's going on? Your church is formed by Stalin. It's saying you're schismatics, and you're the actual heretics. So what's up? Patriarch of Moscow. Alexis, at the consecration of the Cathedral of the Church of Christ in Kaliningrad, said that the reunification cannot be spoken of as equals. Indeed, the MP has 27,000 parishes, while ROCOR has only 280. You, in your grace, in your statement, mentioned the decisions of the Moscow Council of 1948, which stated about the ecumenical church that it can be huge and worldwide, but this does not make it the Church of Christ and apostolic. So, regarding the words of the patriarch, one can also say that quantity, 27,000 parishes, and quality, canonical status, are not the same. Further, in Kaliningrad, Patriarch Alexis Drozdov recalled the words of Metropolitan Vitaly that when the church in Russia gains freedom, ROCOR will bring to the Moscow Patriarch an account of its activities in their address to the Council of Bishops in 1994. Father Alexander Lebedev and George Larin wrote that any mentally informed person should know that His Holiness is a direct appointee of the Soviet authorities, who diligently collaborated with them through his career. Sensible clergy of the MP even stopped commemorating His Holiness after his infamous speech before the New York rabbis, whom he called brothers, handing them a precious chalice while delivering a speech in which he portrayed true orthodoxy. On July 14th, 1990, the ROCOR Synod of Bishops issued a decree regarding Alexis Ridiger as the Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia due to the uncanonical nature of his election and enthronement to the primatial see. Has his decisions been changed, and if so, on what basis? Can the uncanonical nature of Alexis' election as the Patriarch of Moscow be corrected before a local council? If not, then at best he should be considered Metropolitan Alexis Locum as the Patriarchal See. The resolution of the 2003 pastoral meeting speaks of the rapprochement of all parts of the Russian local church. Why then does the Russian True Orthodox Catacomb Church not participate in this process? That's a great question there. Why does ROCOR at this point has been in communion with the Greco calendars and the Catacomb Church. Now, with signing this agreement with the Moscow Patriarchate, they break communion with, and this was a stipulation from the Moscow Patriarchate, to break communion with the Greco calendars and break communion with the Catacomb Church, who the Soviet Church slaughtered for years, And so they end up doing this thing, and they break communion with the true Orthodox, and then they say, then these people now, the ROCOR MP people, guess what they say? They say the true Orthodox are schismatic. It's like, we didn't do anything. We didn't change our ecclesiology. You're the ones who left, and broke communion to go in communion with the devil. That's what happened. And they got people snowed because people don't look into anything. They just be like, okay, like you told me so. So it states that the true Orthodox Catacomb Church is in prayerful and Eucharistic communion with ROCOR. These are the independent parts of the one undivided Russian Church. The 1994 Hierarchical Sobor of ROCOR, in its resolution on the church situation, issued an epistle to the children of the ROCOR and all Orthodox Christians in Russia, which says, quote, "We do not accept the ruling hierarchy of the Moscow Patriarchate as the lawful successor of the hierarchy of the Russian Orthodox Church. How can there be a talk of any canonical union with the MP? Is there some hidden mechanism or principle of simultaneous existence of Sergianism and freedom from it, unity and non-communion. How can the immortal soul belong to God and the body belong to the devil? Such a union cannot be canonically recognized and therefore not to be pleasing to God and blessed, because the devil cannot be united with God in its righteousness with unrighteousness. We have no right to force our flock to unite with the NP until it has renounced Sergianism and ecumenism. We ask your grace to publish a truthful and clear statement of the MP regarding the resolution of these issues. Pray for us, most beloved Reverend Bishop, and bless us, sinful servants of God, the undersigned clerks, parish of the Australian Deanery of ROCOR that did not accept the union with the MP. Dean of the Australian Deanery of ROCOR under the Omniphoron of the Synod of Roki, Mitrid, Archbishop Ion, Stukach, or something like this. I'm going to give some other stuff here that is pretty interesting there. That's a banger. Okay. Is everybody alright? Is this glitched? Like, what's going on? Okay, so I could go to I'm just going to go to High Treason now. The paper is titled High Treason, the luring of the Russian Orthodox Church Abroad to the Moscow Patriarchate. And it starts off with the quote, "My brothers, get far away from heretics, St. Pocomius of Chios." And this had been put out by Olga, written by Olga Ackerly-Dolskaja, former professor of music, Holy Trinity Seminary in Jordanville, New York. This paper was released by the orthodoxtraditionalist.com, and that's Subdeacon Nectarius. So you can find a copy of it if anybody's listening. I don't know if you are, but you can find a copy of this paper in the description. So we're going to start here from the beginning. In recent years, and especially since the onset of the perestroika, changes had begun to take place in the Russian Orthodox Church Abroad, or ROCOR. At first, they were perceptible only to those who followed events closely, but then, with the appearance of the October 2000 epistle of the Council of Bishops, it became evident to everyone willing to read that the new direction had been designed to create a path for communication and dialogue with the official Russian Orthodox Church, ROC, otherwise known as the MP, or the Moscow Patriarchate. The epistle, although heavily cloaked in admonishing its flock to remain busy with their own salvation and personal piety, rather than meddling in church affairs, also recognized the Moscow Patriarchate as the legitimate church and canceled the infamous declaration of 1927 by Metropolitan Sergianists, later to become known as the first, quote, patriarch of the official Soviet Orthodox Church, a church that worked hand in hand with the communist regime in the destruction of thousands of churches and monasteries, as well as the brutal torture and murder of millions of faithful. In other words, the annihilation of orthodoxy. Perestroika means restructuring in Russia, was a political and economic reform policy initiated by the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. He's got a crazy quote, that guy, Mikhail Gorbachev. He said something crazy about the New World Order. I can't think of it right now, but it's wild. In the mid-1980s, and aimed at revitalizing the stagnant Soviet economy, reconstructing introduced elements of market economics, decentralization of government control, and limited private enterprise. It also sought to increase transparency in government and reduce the power of the Communist Party, while it intended to strengthen socialism. uh, Perestroika inadvertently accelerated the dissolution of the Soviet Union by exposing systematic weaknesses and fostering political dissent. It is only natural, that the October 2000 epistle was followed by a multitude of protests, only from them to be silenced and clergy forbidden to serve simply because they came to the defense of the church abroad, and gave very plausible reasons why a rapprochement with the MP was not possible. Such treatment of dedicated clergy in an ugly and unprecedented event in the history of ROCOR, and it resembles the tactics and behaviors of the KGB controlled MP rather than ROCOR. The MP, which calls itself the Mother Church, despite the fact that it was established by Stalin and is younger than the pre-revolutionary Church Abroad, we just went through that, and their own bishops early on admitted this before this union thing, so they had a bird's eye view of what was going on. So let you guys write polemics and all that. Were you there? Because we got paperwork from what the people that were there, and they're saying this is what happened, and that this church. I mean, it's documented. You can't lie about it. It's Soviet propaganda. You can't defend the church with a lie, and you're not defending the church, and you're not defending orthodoxy by supporting that satanic red church. That it's crazy. So it goes on and says, in an ugly and unprecedented event, the MP, which calls itself the Mother Church, despite the fact that it is established by Stalin and is younger than the pre-revolutionary Church Abroad, is not a church, but an organization that has been used as a tool to combat religion by the atheist communist regime in the USSR and Russia today. The ROC has always been a tool of the state, though technically there was a separation between church and state after the Bolshevik Revolution. The church, as a potential enemy with its own philosophy, was alien to the Soviet state. And for that reason, in the initial stage of the Bolshevik Revolution, all the church people who honestly believed that they had their own supreme being to serve, not the state, were mostly exterminated. Therefore, to suddenly speak of the MP as a legitimate church, as was done by the hierarchy in the October epistle, created dissension and profound consternation, which was voiced by the people around the world. Hold on one second. Is anybody here right now? Like, I don't know. There hasn't been a comment in a while, and I'm kind of tripped out if this thing glitched or something. I don't know. So, initial stage of the Bolshevik Revolution. Where was I? Okay. Yeah. Stalin, as younger than his pre-revolutionary Church Abroad, is not a church but an organization that has been used as a tool to combat religion by the atheist communist regime in the USSR and the Russia today. The ROC has always been a tool of the state, though technically there was a separation between church and state after the Bolshevik Revolution. The church, as a potential enemy with its own philosophy, was alien to the Soviet state. And for that reason, in the initial stage of the Bolshevik Revolution, all the church people who honestly believed that they had their own supreme being to serve, not the state, were mostly exterminated. Therefore, to suddenly speak of the MP as a legitimate church, as was done by the hierarchs of the October epistle, created dissension and profound uh, consternation, which was voiced by people around the world, including Russia, through letters, protests, and Orthodox lists on the internet. Finally, in July 2001, I think it was Father Joseph who was talking about this, but like a lot of this stuff was wiped off the web. Like this very paper was gone for like 15 to 20 years. It just was wiped off the web. They didn't want anybody knowing about this stuff. And that's why you don't hear too much about it. Like you're finally hearing more about this stuff because we got, you know, a guy like Subdeacon coming out and doing some great work with it, and like, the true Orthodox guys that are out here that do work, and to get the message out. But even then, the propaganda is so heavy; it's so hard to get through, to cut through. The people are not. I mean, they've just been bombarded with it so long. De-individuation and repetition bias, and just there's so many cognitive biases going on. You could show them clear proof in their face over and over and over again, and they'll come up with like the crazy excuse, you know, to avoid it. It's pretty maddening. So the president of the Synod of Bishops, I'm sorry, I'm like talking too much, really. Therefore, to suddenly speak the NP as a legitimate church, as was done by the hierarchs in the October epistle, created dissension. Yeah, I read that. The president of the Synod of the Bishops of the Church Abroad, His Eminence Metropolitan Vitaly, was forcibly and illegally removed in what can be considered one of the most odious coup d'etats in history. Those unfamiliar with the coup might want to acquaint themselves with at least of the most recent events. For instance, the fact that Metropolitan Vitaly's June 22nd epistle, which he ordered to be read from the ambo in all the churches, was forbidden from being read, more specifically suppressed on the orders of Bishop Gabriel Chemodovkov. This guy, this Bishop Gabriel guy, with unprecedented insolence on the part of a young bishop towards the first hierarch. Bishop Gabriel, with the help of Archbishop Mark Ardent, discredited Metropolitan Vitaly's epistle as not having been written by the Metropolitan. Wow, that's dirty. So he wrote something to be read for the ambo, and they're like, he didn't really write that. Unbelievable. The accusation was later proven to be wrong, and the document was authentic. One should also become acquainted with the accounts of the infamous July 10th and 13th events, with the first hierarch was literally yelled at and lied to by the bishops under him. On July 10th, when I want to point this out, Subdeacon did an interview, I think it was with Father Andrew. His last name's is like slipping my name right now, but he was talking about, that I think Metropolitan Vitaly felt like there was a whole bunch of people like kind of gathering around him. Then he could tell that they were being replaced by kind of KGB agents. Right? It's like these people around me aren't right. Something's up. The same thing happened to the Catacomb Church under Metropolitan Joseph of Petrograd. They just set up a bunch of KGB agents in the clergy and just overtook them. So this is kind of their MO. So it goes on. It says the Metropolitan walked out of the meeting in which he was rudely mistreated, thus canceling it and making all subsequent meetings of the new synod illegal. Much has been written about the events of that week, but suffice it to say, people who voiced their concern and spoke in defense of the Metropolitan and the Church Abroad, as well against the union with the NP, were invariably silenced, labeled as mentally unbalanced or otherwise incompetent, and considered schismatics who, quote, refuse to obey their bishops. Words such as sectarians, fanatics, and extremists have been applied to them. Words that stem directly from the KGB-controlled Moscow Patriarchate and have always been used by the KGB to degrade, weaken, and discredit. Yeah, that's right. So all you Ortho bros out there, guess what you're repeating? You're repeating KGB propaganda. That was started by them, and it was fanned through the internet, and it was fanned through, churches, and our people have been dealing with it for a long time. I'm rather new to it, so I can't act like, I've had the worst of the deal, but there's some of us who really have. It is with a great sorrow and shame that one reads the reactions to the coup in the Russian press. To coup d'etat and ROCOR, apparently Metropolitan Vitaly has been expelled from ruling the church. The virtual release of Metropolitan Vitaly from his duties as the first hierarch of ROCOR and his expulsion from the synod, Archbishop Levor and Bishop Michael literally demanded that he vacate his room in the synod building, coincided with the 50th celebration of his service as a hierarch. And he was an older man, too, at this time. This is wild. The members of the Synod Abroad not only did not respond to many of the offers to reward him with the right to wear a second Pangea together with the title of the Most Holy, but subjected him to obstruction. The refusal of the Synod Abroad members to use most of the elementary rules of respect for their elderly first hierarch, even on the celebration of the 50th, quote, golden anniversary, stands as an important indicator of the spiritual atmosphere which reigns in today's pro-Moscow Patriarch leadership of the Church Abroad. For those who do not have access to the internet and are patiently, quote, obeying their bishops, it is crucial for the sake of ROCOR's existence to become acquainted with what has been withheld from them. After the coup, an epistle was issued by the bishops stating that, quote, they cannot fail to note how, through the wide dissemination of all manners of distortion and false interpretations, especially on websites formed for the purpose of the internet, full of slander against the hierarchy, the epistle admonishes pay no attention to the various open letters and statements by they that mean the protest in the October 2000 epistle voiced by those who concerned. So very early on, they're telling people, don't listen to those schismatic fanatics. They're just losing their minds. They're psychos. This was just to weaken them, and it's never stopped. They have never stopped doing this. It's sick. It's sick, satanic, which are being disseminated on the internet by electronic mail by various provocateurs. By these bishops fail to mention is that for many years now, a very vocal, persistent, highly determined, and organized group of real provocateurs have been unrelentingly brainwashing the flock on the internet, promoting what they have thought would be a smooth rapprochement and convergence with the MP, cheering each other as they went along. This has become so obvious to the reader's dismay that they have been labeled the, quote, pro MP faction, gradually leading the church abroad into union with the MP in the ecumenical world orthodoxy. As stated in their epistles, quote, not one of the hierarchs is striving for a speedy unification with the MP. Maybe not speedy, but a definite, gradual, highly calculated, behind the scenes process has been underway for years. So this is right before it happened. I think it's 2006. It happened in 2007. So this is Olga's she was there. So behind the names of those who have been obviously advocates of the union stand others who are steering the entire process. Their names will become known later as more is unveiled, but for now it is important to make the unveiling process available to the public rather than being fearful of repercussions and personal attacks. This work is humbly dedicated to those who intended to help the church abroad continue its existence in whatever capacity God has endowed them. To those who will not be afraid of spreading the truth and disseminating literature banned by the official so-called pro-MP faction, and those who do not have access to the internet, apparently a large number of parishioners who have remained in the dark during the entire process. We haven't even started, really. So, uh, 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 reactions from Moscow is where we're at. This is so strange. Like, I'm doing this whole thing and no one's saying a word. Like, are you guys good? Hello? I don't know. No one's going to say anything. I'm just going to go with them. I don't know. I'll come back and read this. I'll do a part two. I don't know what's going on.